So, happy Easter. And when you were a child, did you celebrate? Did you, say, put on some fancy clothes? That's where I got my habit. We always got new clothes. We always got dressed up. We always, then we went to church and gave my parents a little Christmas, a little Easter holiday away from us, because they didn't go. I figured it out finally after, 30 or 40 years. That was their present to themselves. Now you run along, be good little kids. They're buying you clothes now. Shoo. But it was a happy time. And it also, when we got home then, here was the Easter basket, a few gifts. It was memorable, you can tell, for me. And so Easter has always been a celebratory time. But for me back then, it was mostly about the chocolate rabbits, the hard-boiled eggs, and the presents. And now it's more about the presence of Spirit. Now, I do love all the other stuff too, don't I? Mm-hmm. Yes. And but for me today, we're going to talk a little bit about resurrection, what it means, so we can kind of bring us up from our past into maybe metaphysically in the science of mind. And I'll be clarifying for me as well as you the metaphysical interpretations of the 12, the apostle-disciple group that surrounded Jesus on the Last Supper. So I start with, what does resurrection mean? What does it mean for you? Well, for me, it's revealing the Spirit self. Now, in the story of the Bible, after a week of abuse and chastising, Jesus was crucified. He was killed. Then he was taken down and put into a cave or a tomb and covered with a big rock, where he lay for 3 days. Number 3. 1, 2, 3 days. Now, I've always had a hard time with a human being actually coming back to life in that purely science sense. But I do believe that we can die to our old beliefs. I do believe that we can transform into something greater in our consciousness. Because I know there's always something greater to know. I used to think, back up. I used to think that something greater was a bigger car. Nothing wrong with a bigger car. But it was the feeling of that bigger, that greater. And it wasn't about just the having it now. It was the sense that it moved me forward to something more. And so to be grateful for where we are in the moment of that resurrection, for me, that keeps the motor running. And it keeps me looking forward with high anticipation. And I believe that's what Jesus' story is about. He moved through all this anguish and turmoil he knew there was something greater. And so that's the story of our lives. When we go into this space in our mind and our hearts and our lives, where we can just shut it all out. Put the stone over all the drama. Shut it out. And focus on what is true. Focus on truth. Focus on life. Focus on joy and love and peace. And when we're convinced of that in our Science of Mind, Spiritual Mind treatment, in our meditations, whatever we use, our prayers, when we are more wholly, with a H and a WH, certain, then we can break out. We can move forward. And we are lighter beings. Each of us transforms when we open to the light of truth. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Book of the Month, Stained Glass Spirit. I love this book. It's large black print on white paper. Easy to read, easy to see. But the words and the message, and what I loved about just the whole stained glass spirit is the symbolism of how bringing all these points of colors into the outer, there's a surrounding, but there's all these colors of light coming into the center, like a rosette. Since 1974, I have lived in a home with stained glass windows. Up until a year ago. And so when I read this, I went, oh my goodness. Interesting to look back and see how much that has been in my life, and then to put it kind of all together to see how those pieces have reflected my life. Because I believe we're drawn to things for the symbol that they represent to us, just as Jesus was drawn to the symbol of the cross. Because the symbol of the cross, I learned many years ago from my teacher, Dr. Carolyn, passed this on to me, is crossing out the fiction in our lives. So Jesus had to get to the point where all the fiction was eliminated. All the story, all the stuff that came before, white out, delete, trash, bleach bit. I don't know. What do we use now? I don't know. So, but I love this book. And what I think is interesting too about the Notre Dame is what remained of the structure. The symbolism, the rosette, the stained glass windows. They're standing. So they will continue to serve as a beacon, as a draw of light, as a centering for those people who needed so much. The stained glass spirit also talks about the unity within diversity. Again, all the colors coming together to form a perfect window. In this book, in the chapter Diversity is a Divine Idea, Tracy takes a quote from the Bible, from Acts, and it is this. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and boundaries of their dwelling place, that they should seek God, in the hope that they might feel their way toward him and find him. And in my words, in the hope that with divine love and an open heart, one of faith and joy and peace, that we allow Spirit to draw us unto itself. But there's a feeling that goes with the flow of us. And we either allow it to flow freely through us or less freely. Jesus knew this in the story with his disciples. All 12. All 12. How much time do you folks have this morning? I got a lot of notes. but I paraphrased. 12 disciples, apostles, they crossed over in my research. So I picked the top 12 that I could filter out. Because some had a name in the Old Testament, and then their name changed in the New, and then it was somebody's brother who had the same first name but a different, more or lesser. Anyway, look it up. It's quite interesting read. If you're really bored, look it up. So, the number 12. 12 disciples. The number 12 is made up of two numbers, 1 and 2. 1 is a prime number, and it signifies the beginning and the singular nature of the universe. And combined with 2, the 12, that signifies completion. I had never researched that before, so this is new to me. This is profound to me. We hear a lot about 7 days a week, on the seventh day, God rested. Well, that must have come after 12. I don't know. I don't know which came first, the 7 or the 12. And so, there were 12 apostles and disciples, and so this morning, what I would like to share with you are some of the metaphysical interpretations of each of these names. And for me, it helped clarify the real, true, metaphysical, spiritual meaning of Christmas, more than just the human story. All right? What did I say? Oh, different gift, different day. Sorry. Merry Christmas. I'm glad you're listening. You too. Wow. So the first one I'll talk about is John. John is that innate principle in us all, which ever seeks to do right. Signifies a high intellectual perception of truth. Any Johns here? There we go. Hey. James represents the faculty of judgment, of order in individual consciousness. There you go, James. James the Less signifies the obscure nature, the hidden or unaware beliefs that we have. So there's not a lesser value, it's just yet the unknowns. Simon the Zealot, do you love that? The Zealot. Relates to an individual's understanding through the strength of one's faith. What we see as a possibility comes into visibility, and we call it substance. So what we put faith into shows up as our experience. Simon the Zealot. Peter, meaning strong, firm, a rock. Full name was Simon Peter, not Simon the Zealot. See? Peter is the spiritual faculty of faith. Typifies that state of unsteadiness. Pay attention here. Of unsteadiness, which fluctuates from the high spiritual to the material, yet with an ever-recurring desire for spirit and for the things of spirit, which then is bound to lead into the light. Wondering. Simon is the spiritual receptivity of the mind, the ability to hear. Simon, the hearing, represents the spiritual receptivity of the mind, and Peter represents the ability of the mind to lay hold of and establish ideas in consciousness. Whew. Need a break? Matthew. Matthew represents the will faculty in man. And this willingness to give up the belief in money getting, and this turned into the teachings of the Christ. The result is a conversion of the will. And under spiritual law, the will becomes the producer instead of a parasite. When our human will runs freely, it can get us into trouble, can't it? Anyone else experience when our ego gets in the way of the will? Oh yeah. Happened a while back. But when we propel from spirit, from the truth, it's a great producer. I love that, the will of the human becomes a parasite. Ugh. We're halfway there. Bartholomew, the faculty of imagination. Any Bartholomews here? Bart. Andrew represents the strength of the mind. Andrew? Our practitioner of the day. And Judas. Anyone ever heard of Judas? Mm-hmm. Also known as Judah. And Judas Iscariot represents the custodian of life, the unredeemed life forces. Now, this disciple examples the human aspect of betrayal that sets us on a path away from a greater spiritual life. This can be overcome by affirming our unity with the spirit of purity, offering praise and thanksgiving, the result being greater expression of spiritual substance. And so when we betray our spiritual aspect, that same thing as will. Number 10, Philip. Philip represents the power faculty in man. It functions through the power center of the body at the root of the tongue. Philip exercises his power through the spiritual word. Speak your word. Powerful thing. Jesus is to have said, and I quote, "The words that I have spoken unto you are spirit and are life." So if the words are spirit, and spirit is energy, then that energy spoken creates the life that we currently have. Thomas represents the understanding faculty in man, reasoning, the discernment of spirit through the outer signs. I call it a researcher, maybe. Huh? Yeah. And last but not least, Matthias represents the higher religious thoughts of man awakening to a realization of his divine possibilities. So, as you can see or hear, that these are all aspects of us. Each of us have these parts within us. And some are more, let me see. nurtured, cultivated, directed, thoughtful, faith-based and propelled than others. And so therein lies our call to a higher spiritual awareness. That when one of those shows up that's the lesser, we have an opportunity to look at it, close the door on it, close the door of the tomb, think about that for a while, and have a new result. So I would like to do another quote from the book, Stained Glass Spirit. And it is about what is happening in the world of effect. And it could be this morning in your world of effect. It could be right here. And this is the quote. When did we forget that what is happening anywhere is what is happening everywhere? And it's actually impossible to separate ourselves from pain, confusion, anger, fear, disparities, hatred, and violence that is so prevalent in our world today. There is no spot where God is not. Who has heard that? I mean, I think we've all heard that. I tell myself that a lot these days. God is just as ready to be revealed in the messy parts of human life as in the serene parts of human life. God is in the entire range of experiences. End quote. Some of that's kind of hard to take, huh? When we're having a challenge and when we're having insults hurled our way, whatever they are. It's easy to say, oh yeah, I'm all spirited up when I'm in my little chair or my space at home in my garden, in my meditation. That's easy. And we should still do that. Because that's our tomb of renovation and resurrection. But it's not as easy many times once you walk out those doors. That's why we come here. How many more hours do I have? Okay. 4. Is that minutes or hours? I have a 12 story. 12 months ago, this month, I sold my home with a stained glass window. 1 year ago. Moved to paradise. Life was bliss. Long about August, James and I signed for our new house. Thank goodness. There was that listening. And so, November the 8th, campfire. February 19, moved into our house. And just about a week ago, I was at a plateau. And it finally came to me that it had been 1 year. 1 year. That my stuff started to get released. It took 12 months. The house, the move, the stuff, the fire. Now, I must tell you, I'm a pretty look through it kind of guy, but that was kind of a down time. And I asked myself, so why? This was the tomb for me. This was my gestation of myself, and I came out of that with, it's all my history, all my past, and yet the thankful part was the new, a fresh, a new beginning, a resurrection of my new life. And it's all perfect. It is all perfect. It took that for me to release it. So that's my story. And it's sticking to me. You know, and the transformation is really, I use the word a lot, magnificent. For me, it's just like a real blessing to be in a new home with someone you love and creating new surroundings and things you think you want to have with you as this newness. The friends have all remained, thank you very much, and have been most supportive. And there's so many gifts. There are so many gifts yet to be unwrapped. Ernest Holmes tells us, if one will have faith in himself, faith in his fellow men, in the universe and in God, and by the light of this faith, he will be able to see that all is good. And the light shed by this faith will light the way for others. Hopefully, I can shed some light for others. So, let me see. An affirmation for today. Easter Sunday. Yeah, we're through with Christmas. Would you repeat after me if you choose? Today, I step through the portal of truth and into the radiant presence of Spirit. Namaste. And so it is.